Local church is devastated after one of their workers is killed, and police say the suspect is her husband.
The church told us he also worked there. 41 Action News reporter Andres Gutierrez live at the church tonight with more. Andres.
The 911 call came in at 4 p.m. on a January afternoon in Overland Park, Kansas. A neighbor and apartment manager reported loud noises coming from an upstairs unit. When police arrived, they found Robert Harris alone in the apartment. There were red stains on the carpet, broken glass scattered across the floor, but his wife, Tanisha, was nowhere to be seen. Hours later, Robert called the police himself, now claiming his wife was missing. She had left her bank job for lunch at 11:44 a.m. and never returned. He sounded worried, concerned, the natural reaction of a husband whose wife hadn't come home. But something didn't add up. The officers who questioned Robert noticed inconsistencies in his story. His concern seemed performative rather than genuine. And those stains on the carpet? They weren't there by accident. Welcome to Shadows of Crime. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button as we explore the darkest corners of human behavior and seek justice for those who can no longer speak for themselves. Today, we're examining the case that shattered a Kansas City church community and left its members reeling in disbelief. A case where appearances couldn't have been more deceiving. Tanisha and Robert Harris weren't just any couple. They were pillars of their church. She, an associate pastor known for her spiritual energy and compassion. He, a respected elder who led prayers and counseled members in need. They were, as their pastor described them, part of the backbone of everything we do. Their social media accounts painted the picture of devout Christians living their faith daily. Their wedding, just 18 months earlier, had been a celebration of love blessed by God Himself. There was literally no sign that would indicate that there was any trouble, their pastor would later tell reporters, his voice hollow with shock. But by dawn the next morning, investigators would be standing in a field in Raymore, Missouri, staring down at a black garbage bag containing Tanisha's body. What could drive a church elder to murder his pastor wife? What happened in those hours between Tanisha's lunch break and the 911 call? And what secret was so dangerous, so threatening, that it was worth killing to protect? The answer would reveal a double life that no one in the congregation could have imagined, and a betrayal that went far beyond breaking marriage vows. Tanisha Harris was 38 years old when she died, a woman whose life radiated faith and service. As an associate pastor at Repairers Kansas City, a charismatic non-denominational church in Missouri, she wasn't just a figurehead. She delivered powerful sermons that connected with the congregation on a profound level, counseled members through their darkest moments, and organized community outreach programs that touched countless lives. She was loving and kind, and she would do anything for you, recalled Minister Hope Elizet, who worked alongside Tanisha. She was very soft-spoken and sweet, but powerful. This combination of gentleness and strength made her a magnetic presence in the church, someone people naturally gravitated toward for guidance and comfort. Outside the church walls, Tanisha maintained a successful career at a local bank, balancing her spiritual calling with professional responsibilities. She was a devoted mother to her daughter from a previous marriage, creating a stable and loving home despite the demands on her time. Robert Lee Harris Jr., 8 years Tanisha's junior at 30, had traveled a different path to faith. Originally from Florida, he had served in the U.S. Army, stationed first in South Korea and later in the northeastern United States. It was during his military service that he discovered Repairers Kansas City Online. Something about the church's message resonated deeply with him. Intrigued, Robert began corresponding with Pastor Carlton Funderburk. The embers of romance began to bubble, Funderburk would later explain, describing how Robert visited Kansas City multiple times, meeting Tanisha during these trips. Their connection was immediate and powerful, a relationship that seemed divinely orchestrated. After receiving an honorable discharge from the military, Robert made a life-altering decision. He relocated here primarily for her, Pastor Funderburk explained. Robert quickly integrated himself into the church community, rising to the position of elder. He became known as their go-to man when members couldn't reach the pastor, a spiritual counselor trusted with the congregation's most intimate problems. In July 2016, they married in a spiritual ceremony at Greater Holy Temple in East Kansas City. The wedding was a community celebration, with the congregation witnessing what everyone believed was a perfect union of two faithful servants. They created a blended family, with Robert's daughter visiting during holidays, while Tanisha's daughter lived with them full-time. On social media and in person, they projected an image of the ideal Christian couple. They were just good, solid people and outstanding members of their community, Pastor Funderburg would insist. Even after everything fell apart, church members observed how affectionate they were with each other, how they supported one another's ministries, how they seemed to embody the Christian ideal of partnership. Yet beneath this carefully constructed image of domestic and spiritual harmony, something was terribly wrong. The man who counseled church members through their troubles harbored secrets of his own. The woman who preached truth from the pulpit had no idea that her husband was living a double life, one that would ultimately prove fatal for her. No one suspected, not the congregation who looked up to them, not their pastor who had blessed their union, not even Tanisha herself. January 8th began like any other Monday for Tanisha Harris. She arrived at her bank job early that morning, greeted colleagues, and settled into her daily routine. Security footage would later show her at her desk, focused on her work, completely unaware that these would be the final hours of her life. At 11:44 a.m., she left for lunch, a normal break in an otherwise ordinary day. She told co-workers she'd be back shortly. She never returned. While Tanisha was at work that morning, Robert Harris was busy with a very different kind of agenda. Store surveillance cameras captured him making multiple trips to Walmart, not for groceries or household essentials, but for items that would later become crucial evidence: a garbage can, black plastic bags, carpet cleaner, and a filleting knife. The timing of these purchases would later prove damning, suggesting premeditation rather than a crime of passion. What happened when Tanisha came home for lunch remains known only to Robert, but the aftermath became public when, at approximately 4 p.m., police received a call about a domestic disturbance at the Harris apartment on Perry Street in Overland Park. A neighbor and the apartment manager reported hearing loud noises, the sounds of conflict, breaking glass, and what they believed was a physical altercation. When officers arrived, they found Robert alone in the apartment. There was no sign of Tanisha. The officers noted red stains on the carpet and broken glass scattered across the floor, physical evidence that something violent had occurred. Yet Robert offered no explanation for his wife's absence or the state of their home. The officers, lacking sufficient cause to detain him at that point, left after documenting the scene. Hours later, at approximately 8:30 p.m., Robert called the police himself. Now he claimed his wife was missing. She had left work for lunch, he told them, and never returned. He expressed concern and confusion about her whereabouts, playing the role of the worried husband. But the officers who responded to this second call were the same ones who had been there earlier. They remembered the state of the apartment. They recalled Robert's demeanor during their first visit. And now, hearing him report his wife missing after showing no concern for her whereabouts just hours before, their suspicions deepened. Detective questioning began, and Robert's story quickly unraveled. His timeline didn't match what they knew from Tanisha's co-workers. His explanation for the state of the apartment contradicted what they had observed. His account of his own activities that day omitted the multiple Walmart trips that store cameras had already documented. As the interrogation intensified, Robert's facade cracked. Under mounting pressure from investigators who clearly didn't believe his story, he finally admitted involvement in his wife's disappearance. But even then, he didn't immediately confess to murder. Instead, he began a gradual revelation that would lead investigators to a field in Raymore, Missouri, about 20 miles from the couple's apartment. What exactly had police found in that apartment that made them so suspicious? What evidence was so compelling that it broke through Robert's carefully constructed story? And What would they discover when they followed his directions to that remote field in the pre-dawn hours of January 9th? The answers would shock even veteran investigators and reveal just how thoroughly Robert Harris had betrayed not only his marriage vows, but the most basic tenets of the faith he claimed to serve. When crime scene technicians processed the Harris apartment, what initially appeared as red stains on the carpet confirmed investigators' worst fears. They were blood. Despite Robert's attempts to clean the scene with the carpet cleaner purchased earlier that day, luminol testing revealed blood-spattered patterns consistent with a violent struggle. The broken glass belonged to a shattered picture frame, a wedding photo of the couple that had been knocked from the wall during the altercation. In the kitchen trash, officers discovered torn packaging from the items Robert had purchased at Walmart. The receipt, which he had carelessly discarded, provided a timestamp that contradicted his initial statements about his whereabouts that morning. Most damning of all, they found traces of black plastic similar to the garbage bags he had purchased, with one bag missing from the box. If you're finding this case as disturbing as I did when researching it, make sure to hit that like button and leave a comment below. Your engagement helps us bring these important stories to light and ensures that victims like Tanisha aren't forgotten. As the physical evidence mounted, Robert's story began to shift. First, he claimed Tanisha had never come home for lunch. When confronted with witness statements confirming her car had been in the apartment parking lot, he changed his account, saying they had argued but she had left angry. When shown the blood evidence, he pivoted again, suggesting she had fallen and injured herself before leaving. Detective Sarah Lund, the lead investigator on the case, later described the interrogation as a textbook example of a guilty person trying to distance themselves from responsibility. Each time Robert was confronted with contradictory evidence, he adjusted his narrative, moving incrementally closer to the truth, while still attempting to minimize his culpability. "We knew we were dealing with a calculated individual," Lund would later testify at trial, "someone who believed he could outsmart us by gradually conceding points while maintaining plausible deniability." The breaking point came around 1:30 a.m. on January 9th, when detectives presented Robert with cell phone tower data showing Tanisha's phone had traveled to Raymore, Missouri, a location he had never mentioned, before going offline permanently. Confronted with this technological evidence that placed her phone in an area he had no legitimate reason to visit, Robert finally cracked. "I'll show you where she is," he reportedly told detectives, his voice flat and emotionless. A convoy of police vehicles followed Robert's directions to a field near 163rd Street and Kentucky Road in Raymore. There, in the pre-dawn darkness illuminated by police spotlights, officers discovered a black garbage bag, partially concealed in tall grass. Inside was Tanisha's body, still dressed in the clothes she had worn to work that morning. The scene shifted to the medical examiner's office, where Dr. Michael Henderson performed the autopsy later that day. His findings painted a grim picture of Tanisha's final moments. The cause of death was manual strangulation. Robert had used his hands to choke the life from his wife. Bruising on her neck showed the significant force applied, while defensive wounds on her hands and arms indicated she had fought desperately for her life. Additional injuries included blunt force trauma to her head, consistent with being struck against a hard surface, possibly explaining the broken glass and disrupted scene at the apartment. The time of death was estimated between noon and 2 p.m. on January 8th, aligning with when she had left work for lunch. From the investigator's perspective, the timeline now became clear. Robert had planned the murder in advance, making his Walmart purchases early that morning. When Tanisha came home for lunch, he attacked her, likely after a confrontation. After killing her, he wrapped her body in the garbage bags, placed it in the newly purchased garbage can, and transported it to the field in Raymore. He then returned home, attempted to clean the scene, and was interrupted by police responding to the neighbor's call about the disturbance. But one crucial question remained unanswered. Why? What could possibly drive a church elder to murder his pastor wife with such calculation and brutality? The answer would emerge during the investigation's next phase, revealing a secret life that Robert had hidden from everyone in his religious community, including his wife. As investigators dug deeper into Robert Harris's life, they uncovered a reality starkly different from the devout church elder persona he presented to the world. Digital forensics specialists examining his phone and computer found evidence of a secret relationship, one that had been ongoing for months before Tanisha's murder. Robert had been involved in an intimate relationship with a young man named Stephen Jr., conducting their affair through private messages, video calls, and clandestine meetings. Stephen Jr., initially reluctant to come forward, eventually provided a statement to investigators that shattered the case wide open. "Robert told me he was unhappy in his marriage," Stephen testified during pretrial hearings. "He said his wife didn't understand him, that they were only together because of church expectations." According to Stephen, Robert had discussed divorce but feared the repercussions within their religious community, the loss of his elder status, the judgment from congregation members, and the potential damage to his reputation. Most damning was Stephen's revelation that Robert had never disclosed his sexuality to Tanisha. He said she wouldn't understand, that it would destroy everything they'd built together, Stephen stated. He was living two completely different lives. The relationship between Robert and Stephen wasn't just casual. Text messages recovered from Robert's phone revealed deep emotional involvement and explicit plans for a future together. In one message sent just 3 days before the murder, Robert wrote, "Soon we won't have to hide anymore. I'm figuring things out." Perhaps the most chilling evidence came from a Facebook Live video Robert had posted just 1 week before the murder. In what now appears as calculated image management, he had broadcast a prayer session focused on healing broken relationships and finding God's path through difficult decisions.
"I am coming on. I've been impressed this morning to pray for healing. As a part of my ministry, healing is one of the things that God has called me to, and so I just want to spend just a few minutes with you in prayer concerning healing. I'm on my way to work, but I'm definitely going to pray."
Robert spoke directly to viewers about staying true to your authentic self while honoring your commitments. "Sometimes God puts us in situations that seem impossible," he said in the video, his voice steady and reassuring. "But remember that with faith, all things are possible. Sometimes what seems like an ending is actually a new beginning." Church members who watched the video in real time had commented with praise for his wisdom and spiritual insight. When the same video was played in court, it took on a sinister new meaning: a man contemplating murder while preaching about new beginnings. Financial investigations revealed another potential motive. Robert and Tanisha had a joint life insurance policy worth $100,000, 0 cents, with Robert as the sole beneficiary. Bank records showed their account balances dwindling in the months before the murder, with several large withdrawals made by Robert for unexplained purposes. Investigators later connected some of these withdrawals to hotel stays and gifts for Stephen. When news of Robert's double life reached the Repairers Kansas City congregation, the community was devastated. Pastor Carlton Funderburk, who had performed their wedding ceremony and mentored both Robert and Tanisha, struggled to reconcile the man he thought he knew.
"This loss is profound and utterly indescribable. No way to even wrap one's mind around that, to even see that that would be in the realm of the possible. It doesn't seem real. It seems like a very bad nightmare. Hear the news of this, and there to be any allegation that he's involved makes the blow even all the more deep." They begin to correspond and begin to have conversation, and the embers of romance begin to bud, and so they had a long-distance relationship for quite some time. He relocated here primarily for her.
The case highlights a psychological phenomenon often observed in highly structured religious communities: the compartmentalization that can occur when individuals feel their authentic selves conflict with community expectations. Dr. Elaine Westbrook, a forensic psychologist who studies crimes within religious contexts, explained during trial testimony that this pressure can create dangerous psychological splitting. When someone believes their true identity would be rejected by their community, they sometimes create separate, disconnected lives, Dr. Westbrook testified. In extreme cases, when these worlds risk colliding, the person may take desperate measures to prevent exposure. This psychological perspective doesn't excuse Robert's actions, but provides context for understanding how someone could maintain such contradictory identities. The respected church elder and the man engaged in a secret relationship, until the pressure became unbearable. For Tanisha, the tragic reality was that she had become an obstacle to Robert's desired future. Investigators believe she discovered evidence of his relationship with Stephen, possibly confronting him during that fatal lunch break. Rather than face the consequences of his deception within their religious community, Robert chose to silence her permanently. The revelation of Robert's secret life transformed the narrative from a shocking domestic homicide to something even more complex. A crime born from the collision of public persona and private reality, of religious expectations and hidden desires, of a man who chose murder over honesty when his carefully constructed worlds threatened to collide. The trial of Robert Lee Harris began in August 2022, more than 4 years after Tanisha's murder. The Johnson County Courthouse filled with family members, church congregants, and media, as prosecutors laid out their case against the former church elder. The delay, caused partly by COVID-19 court backlogs and defense motions, had only intensified the community's hunger for justice. Prosecutor Vanessa Mitchell opened with a timeline that methodically dismantled any claim of impulsive action. This was not a crime of passion, she told the jury. This was a calculated execution planned with chilling precision. She displayed the Walmart security footage showing Robert purchasing the murder cleanup supplies hours before Tanisha's death, then presented the receipt with its damning timestamp. The physical evidence was overwhelming. Forensic analysts testified about blood spatter patterns in the apartment that indicated a violent struggle. DNA evidence confirmed Tanisha's blood on the apartment walls despite Robert's cleaning attempts. Cell phone data placed Robert's phone traveling to Raymore precisely when he claimed to be searching for his missing wife. The most powerful testimony came from Detective Sarah Lund, who walked the jury through Robert's evolving statements during interrogation. The courtroom fell silent as she described his final confession. He didn't show remorse. He described strangling his wife with the detachment of someone discussing a business transaction. Stephen Jr. took the stand on the trial's third day, visibly nervous as he faced the man with whom he'd been involved. His testimony revealed that Robert had contacted him just hours after the murder, acting as if nothing had happened. "He texted me that evening saying he was looking forward to seeing me that weekend," Stephen testified, his voice barely audible. He said things were about to change for the better. The defense strategy centered on claiming the killing was unplanned, a spontaneous act during an argument when Tanisha allegedly discovered Robert's relationship with Stephen. Defense attorney Marcus Coleman argued for a lesser charge of second-degree murder, suggesting Robert snapped under the pressure of his double life being exposed. This strategy collapsed when prosecutors introduced Robert's internet search history from the week before the murder, showing queries for how to make death look like accident and life insurance payout spouse murder. The courtroom dynamics shifted dramatically when Tanisha's teenage daughter took the stand. Now living with her grandmother, she described the last time she saw her mother alive. A routine goodbye as Tanisha left for work that January morning. Robert, who had maintained an emotionless demeanor throughout the proceedings, finally showed reaction when his own daughter's written statement was read to the court. Though she didn't attend the trial, her words expressed confusion and betrayal. "I don't understand how the father who taught me about God could do something so evil." After just 4 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict: guilty of first-degree premeditated murder. Robert showed no visible reaction as the verdict was read, staring straight ahead as if disconnected from the proceedings. At the sentencing hearing 2 months later, Judge Patricia Williams delivered the maximum penalty: life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for 50 years. "You betrayed not only your wife and your faith," she told Robert, "but you betrayed the fundamental trust that binds communities together." As Robert was led from the courtroom in handcuffs, Tanisha's mother stood and addressed him directly. "My daughter loved you. She believed in you. God may forgive you, but we never will." Tanisha Harris's murder reveals a devastating truth about domestic violence. It often remains invisible until it's too late. Despite their public roles as spiritual leaders, despite the constant scrutiny of their congregation, no one detected the danger Tanisha faced in her own home. This invisibility is not uncommon. Domestic violence thrives in silence, hidden behind carefully constructed facades of normalcy. Looking back, there were subtle warning signs that went unrecognized. Religious communities face unique challenges in addressing domestic abuse. The emphasis on marriage sanctity, forgiveness, and submission can inadvertently create environments where victims feel unable to speak out. Pastor Funderburg, in the aftermath of Tanisha's murder, implemented new protocols at Repairers, Kansas City, including domestic violence awareness training for all church leaders. "We failed Tanisha," he acknowledged in a sermon 6 months after her death. "Not intentionally, but through our blindness to the dangers that can exist even within our sacred spaces." For those in similar situations, resources exist that understand the complex intersection of faith and abuse. Organizations like the National Domestic Violence Hotline, 1-800-799-723, offer confidential support. Faith-specific resources such as Faith Trust Institute provide guidance for religious communities seeking to address domestic violence. The most crucial lesson from Tanisha's story is that appearances rarely tell the complete truth. The couple that seems perfect on Sunday morning may be living a very different reality by Sunday night. The spiritual leader who preaches about love may be incapable of practicing it at home. This case compels us to look beyond surfaces, to create communities where authentic struggles can be shared without judgment, and to recognize that sometimes the most dangerous threats come from those who appear most trustworthy. Tanisha's legacy now includes this vital message: in matters of abuse, skepticism of perfect appearances may save lives. Tanisha Harris's legacy extends far beyond her tragic murder. She was a spiritual leader who touched countless lives through her ministry, a mother who nurtured her daughter with love, and a community member whose absence left an irreparable void. Though her life was cut short by betrayal from the person she should have been able to trust most, her story serves as a powerful reminder that appearances can mask dangerous realities. The case of Robert and Tanisha Harris forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the hidden nature of domestic violence, even within religious communities that outwardly promote love and respect. It challenges us to look beyond carefully constructed public personas and remain vigilant to the subtle signs that someone might be in danger. What warning signs do you think are most commonly overlooked in cases like Tanisha's? How can religious communities better protect their members from domestic violence? And what responsibility do we all share in creating spaces where people can be authentic about their struggles before they turn deadly? If this story impacted you, please hit that like button and subscribe to Shadows of Crime for more in-depth examinations of cases that reveal the darker sides of human nature. Your comments help build our community and continue these important conversations.